It was the kind of retirement home people dreamed of: manicured lawns, rocking chairs on the porch, nurses with gentle voices and soft hands. Families called it a blessing. Patients called it peace. But peace is a tricky thing, easy to fake, hard to hold. So when a therapy dog named Bear suddenly stopped mid-walk and let out a deep, bone-aching growl at the end of a quiet hallway, the illusion cracked, just a little. Bear wasn't just any dog. He was a retired canine, 6 years on the eel force, over 50 busts, a hero more times than anyone could count, now greying around the muzzle and a little stiff in the hips. Bear spent his days comforting the elderly at Rose Hill Retirement Home. He was calm, gentle, predictable. Until that Tuesday afternoon, it started like any other day. Sunlight poured through the tall windows in room 208, where Miss Dorothy hummed old jazz songs to herself. Nurses wheeled carts down the halls. The air smelled faintly of oatmeal and lemon disinfectant, and Bear, faithful as ever, patted along beside Emily, a 26-year-old nurse fresh out of a difficult internship and still learning the rhythm of this strange, peaceful place. "Come on, buddy," Emily said, tugging his leash gently as they made their way past the West Wing, an older part of the building rarely used these days. That's when Bear stopped. He didn't just pause, he froze. Hackle's raised body, rigid eyes, locked on a door at the far end of the hallway. Room 316. The door was old, heavy. It didn't match the others. A dusty little plaque hung crooked on the frame, but the name had been scratched off. Bear let out a growl so low it made Emily's stomach twist. "Hey, what's wrong?" she whispered, crouching beside him. He didn't respond, not even a tail wag. His nose twitched, tracking something Emily couldn't see. Then he barked, once. Loud, sharp, urgent. Emily had never heard him bark like that. A nearby nurse poked her head out of a room, annoyed. "Everything okay down there?" Yeah, sorry," Emily said quickly. "Just Bear being weird." The nurse frowned. "Don't linger near that door, it's sealed for a reason." Emily nodded, tugged Bear's leash and walked on, but Bear kept looking back that night. Emily couldn't sleep. She tried to shrug it off. Dogs bark, old buildings creak. Maybe a mouse, a smell, something benign. But the way Bear stood like a soldier back on duty kept replaying in her mind. She worked the overnight shift again. On Thursday, Bear seemed restless from the moment they walked in. He usually greeted patients one by one, offering his head for a scratch or gently nudging a hand with his snout. But not tonight. He kept pulling toward the West Wing. Emily didn't want to admit it, but part of her was curious. Room 316 wasn't on any of the floor maps she'd checked, and when she asked Mrs. Langley, the night supervisor, the older woman had replied with a firm, "Don't worry about it. Some rooms are just too far gone." Too far gone, what did that even mean? By 1:30 a.m. the halls were quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of air conditioning and the occasional beep of a heart monitor from the medical wing. Emily walked Bear one last time before bed, and again he dragged her to that same door. Only this time he wouldn't stop barking. 3 short bursts. Pause. 1 long howl. Emily felt a chill down her spine. "Stop it, Bear," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "You're going to wake everybody," but Bear wouldn't stop. That's when she noticed it, the faintest light seeping out from the crack under the door. Her heart skipped. No patients were assigned to that wing. No nurses were posted past room 310. And yet, there was light, faint flickering like a lamp left on, or a TV set to static. She reached for the handle. Locked. Of course. She bent down and peered through the old keyhole, half expecting to see nothing at all, but what she saw sent her reeling back. A shadow moved across the room, slow, dragging something. The shape was vaguely human, but hunched, slouched, like something had been broken and never quite healed. Bear snarled, teeth bared. Something was in that room. Love, real life. Animal heroes support their stories by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, and never miss a new episode of Courage and Compassion. Emily didn't tell anyone the next morning. Not yet. She needed to understand what she saw, what Bear had sensed, but she started asking questions quietly, casually. "Hey, do we ever use the West Wing for storage or something?" Mrs. Langley's face tightened. "Best to stay where you're assigned, sweetheart. I thought I saw a light on in one of those rooms." The older nurse smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Old wiring. Don't worry about it." Emily nodded, but she started taking notes. Then she checked the patient records. Every room on the West Wing, 311 to 320, was listed as vacant or under renovation. But when she looked deeper into the facility's electronic logs, she found something strange. 3 separate medication deliveries, all marked for rooms in that wing, but no patients, no entries, no ID numbers, no intake files, just blank spots in the system. Someone or something was living in that hallway. The following Tuesday, she came in early. Bear was waiting by the door, already pacing. Emily brought a flashlight this time and a voice recorder tucked into her scrubs. She didn't care if she was fired some 2 a.m. She returned. The hallway was silent. The moonlight barely lit the dust dancing in the air. Bear walked slowly beside her head, low ears twitching. The light was on again. This time she tried something different. She crouched beside the door and whispered, "Hello, is someone in there?" No answer, but the light flickered again and Bear stiffened. Then a sound, not a voice, not footsteps, breathing shallow, raspy, and close. Emily's heart pounded. She backed away, slowly, Bear shielding her body with his own. Then the breathing stopped. Just like that. Silence. She turned and walked away, trying to appear calm, but every hair on her arms was standing up. The next morning, Emily went to the director of the facility, Mr. Chambers. He was a tall man with silver hair and an air of corporate calm, the kind of calm that made you feel like nothing was ever urgent, even when it was. She told him everything, the barking, the movement, the flickering light, the missing patient logs. He listened, smiled, and said, "You've been working a lot of night shifts. Emily, sometimes the mind plays tricks." "I saw someone," she insisted. "And Bear, it's an old building," he interrupted, "full of drafts and electrical hiccups. We appreciate your concern, but there's nothing to worry about." She left the office more frustrated than ever. Bear, however, wasn't done later that day as a maintenance worker passed by with a tool cart. Bear lunged not to attack, to grab something. Emily ran over just in time to see Bear tugging a set of keys off the man's belt, and as she picked them up, she saw one had a small rusted labor line. Emily didn't sleep after her shift ended. She sat in her car for nearly an hour, gripping the set of keys Bear had snatched like a lifeline. Her thoughts spiraled. Why would maintenance carry a key to a room that was supposed to be sealed off? And why was it unlabeled in the records, but marked on this key with a faint rusted tag that read 316? She glanced over at Bear, curled up on the passenger seat, snoring softly. Even in rest, his ears twitched at every sound. She couldn't explain it, but the more time she spent with Bear, the more she trusted his instincts over any of the humans she worked with. By the time her next night shift began, she had made up her mind she was going back in M. The hallway to the West Wing was silent, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was unnatural, like sound itself refused to enter. Emily felt the chill in her bones the moment she crossed the threshold. Bear walked beside her again, unusually alert, each paw step deliberate. She held the ring of keys tightly, using her flashlight sparingly to avoid attention. Most of the staff was either off duty or asleep. It was now or never when they reached room 316. Bear stopped and sat, not tense, not aggressive, just waiting, like he knew this moment had to happen. Emily took a breath, selected the key and turned it slowly in the lock. Click. The door gave a soft groan as it opened. The smell hit her first, stale like old sweat and cleaning chemicals that hadn't masked the decay. Her flashlight trembled in her hand. She stepped inside. The room was larger than she'd expected. It wasn't a patient room. Not really. The wallpaper was peeling. The floorboards creaked, but what stood out was that it was lived in. There were 2 narrow hospital beds, both made though one had a deep indentation, like someone had been lying in it for hours. An old IV stand rested by the wall. A TV mounted high in the corner flickered with static, and on the far side a man in a wheelchair, unmoving, facing the wall. Emily's breath caught. "Sir," she said quietly. No response. She edged forward, heart pounding. Bear let out a low growl, staying behind her, near the door. She took another step.
The man stirred. He didn't turn, but he raised one hand slowly, shakily, and pointed at the nightstand beside him. Emily blinked. She walked over carefully and opened the drawer inside. She found a small leather-bound notebook. No name on the cover, just old worn edges and cracked binding. The man finally spoke, his voice dry like he hadn't used it in days. "He thinks no one remembers us." Emily looked.
At him, his face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. He looked 80, maybe 90, but there was something alive in his gaze, something sharp. "Who are you?" she asked. His lips barely moved. "You already know." She didn't, but something about the way he said it chilled her. She flipped open the notebook. The first page read, "They were supposed to be dead." Emily didn't take the notebook right away. She closed it, set it back where she found it, and backed out slowly. Her instincts screamed that she had stayed too long as the door clicked shut behind her. Bear stood and pressed his body against her legs. Protective grounding. She didn't sleep. When she got home, instead, she searched through every database she had access to. Health records, old employment rosters, even news archives. Nothing came up under Room 316 or under the name. She eventually found, scribbled on the inside back cover of the notebook, Gerald H. Brooks. No records, no emergency contact, no patient number, no billing history. It was like the man in that room didn't exist. She tried again the next day, asking a different nurse, one who'd only been there a few months. "Oh, that room," the nurse replied. "They said some ex-vet stays there when his family visits from out of town. I never saw him, though." "Ex-vet?" "Yeah. Or maybe a priest, I don't know. The stories don't match." Emily stopped asking after that. Every answer was a new lie. That weekend, Emily met up with an old friend, Caleb, who worked in healthcare compliance. She didn't tell him everything. Just enough. Could a nursing facility have unregistered patients? She asked over coffee. He raised an eyebrow. "If they're hiding patients, that's a major felony: fraud, abuse, illegal confinement." "Why?" Emily hesitated, then said, "Let's say someone finds a patient with no record, no billing file, no social or ID. What would happen?" He leaned in. "You'd call the state immediately." She nodded, but she didn't. Not yet. Because something about the way Gerald had pointed to that notebook, it felt like there was more. Like this wasn't just fraud, it was deeper, darker. She had to know what they were hiding. Sunday night. Emily returned to room 316. The key slipped into the lock more easily this time, as if the door was waiting for her. Gerald was sitting in the same spot. He didn't turn when she entered, but he spoke. "You came back." "I read a little," she said, holding up the notebook. "It's hard to believe." "Then don't believe, look." He pointed again, this time to a curtain at the far side of the room. Behind it, Emily found a door. A second door. Metal heavy, like something you'd find in a hospital basement or a military facility. It had a biometric scanner beside it. Not a keycard. A scanner. "What is this?" she whispered. Gerald gave a dry chuckle. "That's where the others are." Emily stared at the scanner. "No one else ever comes in here," she said, half to herself. "They can't," he replied. "They don't have the key." He nodded at Bear. Emily blinked. Bear. Not the dog. The name. It was a code once before they retired the program. "What program?" He turned his chair slightly, finally facing her. "The program. They buried. Just like us." She took a step back, heart pounding. What were they doing here? Gerald's eyes locked onto hers, trying to forget what they did. Emily left that night with the notebook in hand. Inside were names, dates. Some were just numbers. Others had red ink slashed across them. One stood out. July 17th, 2009. Subject 13A terminated. And beneath that, written in shaky, looping handwriting, "Not terminated, moved room 317." Her eyes widened. Room 317 was the room next to Gerald's on every official record. It was listed as empty, but that metal door, the scanner, she wasn't just dealing with unlisted patients. There were hidden rooms. The next morning, Emily arrived early. She made coffee, smiled at the other nurses, played along, but all the while she was watching at 10:45 a.m. A man in a brown suit arrived. He carried no badge, no stethoscope. He didn't check in. Emily watched him walk quietly toward the West Wing and disappear into room 317. 10 minutes later, he came out holding a silver briefcase. Emily saw the side of his neck, a small scar, like something had been implanted and later removed.
He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like someone who erased things. Bear growled from across the hallway. Emily didn't stop him. This time, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the man in the brown suit. No ID, no clipboard, no words spoken, just in and out. Clean, quiet, practiced. And the silver briefcase she couldn't shake. The image, it didn't belong in a retirement home. It belonged in a government facility or a movie where people disappeared and nobody asked questions. Bear hadn't taken his eyes off that hallway the entire day. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't lay down. Just stood like a statue. Eyes fixed on room 317. That night, Emily made a decision she never thought she'd make. She clocked out, but she didn't leave. She hid. She waited.
Behind the storage shelves in the laundry room, the one place without security cameras, she could hear the hum of machines and the occasional squeak of a rolling cart as night staff moved around. Midnight came and went. One nap, tang. Then she heard its footsteps soft. Even not a nurse. Not in those shoes. She peered through the crack in the door, just in time to see him again. The man in the brown suit heading down the West Wing. Same routine, briefcase in hand. He used something on his wrist, a dark band, maybe a biometric reader, and entered room 317 without a sound. Emily counted every second. 5 minutes, 10, 15, at minute 20. The door opened again. The man walked out, empty-handed. Gone. Emily waited. 10 more minutes before she moved. Room 317 was different from room 316. Cleaner, colder. The overhead light was harsh, sterile white. There was only one bed, one chair, and strapped to the bed with thick leather cuffs at the ankles and wrists was a woman. Pale skin, shaved, head thin, frighteningly so, but alive. She was awake, staring straight at the ceiling, not blinking, not reacting. Emily rushed to her side. "Hey, can you hear me?" The woman's mouth twitched just a little. "But it was something." "I'm Emily," she whispered, glancing toward the door. "I'm a nurse here. What's your name?" A pause. Then the woman whispered something so soft, Emily had to lean in close to hear it. "Subject 13. Emily's heart stopped. That's what the notebook had said. Subject 13A terminated. But this woman, she was right here alive. Emily reached for the restraints. Bear barked once, sharp and low footsteps. Someone was coming. Emily froze. Her hands hovered over the leather straps. Then she slipped backward into the small supply closet in the corner of the room, barely wide enough to fit her and Bear. She turned off her flashlight and held her breath. The door opened. 2 people entered, not the man in the brown suit. This time these were orderlies, faceless, blank, moving like robots. They didn't speak. One adjusted the IV line, the other checked the monitor. "She's stable," one of them mumbled. "Barely," they said, "no more than 48 hours. The other nodded. "Let her sleep." Then they left. Emily waited 5 minutes, then 10. When she was sure they were gone, she emerged and rushed to the bed. "Hang in there," she whispered. "I'm coming back for you." That morning she called Caleb. "All right," he said over the phone, voice tense. "Let's say you found a hidden patient. You're sure she's not listed anywhere?" "She's not."
Emily replied. She doesn't have a chart. There's a metal door connecting from 316. There's something underground. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then you need to leave. I can't. Yes, you can, he said. Emily, this sounds bigger than elder care fraud you're talking about, illegal detainment, maybe even experimentation if you get caught. I can't leave her there. Emily said, voice firm. She didn't tell him about the notebook. She didn't tell him she had taken it with her that night. That evening she stayed late again openly. This time said she was picking up an extra shift. The staff had grown used to her now. No one questioned it. But as she passed the nurse's station, she overheard something that made her blood run cold. They're moving her tonight, Mrs. Langley said to another nurse. Corporate orders to where doesn't say. Emily kept walking, but she knew what it meant. They were getting rid of Subject 13, whether that meant moving her or silencing her forever. Emily didn't care. She had to act. She waited until just after 2 a.m. Bear was ready, waiting beside the west wing door, like he understood everything. She used the stolen key to enter room 316, then slipped through the metal door Gerald had shown her. This time she brought a portable scanner she borrowed from the front desk, and to her shock it worked. The scanner blinked green access, granted the door to 317 clicked open. From the inside the woman was still there, but this time her eyes followed Emily as she entered. You came back, she whispered. I'm getting you out of here. Emily undid the straps. The woman didn't resist. She moved slowly like someone who hadn't walked in weeks. Bear stood on alert, but didn't bark. He stayed beside them as they crept toward the hallway. That's when the alarms went off. Not fire alarms, security. Red lights flashed along the ceiling. A low siren echoed through the halls. They ran. Emily held the woman up as best she could. Bear barked twice, warning barks, and darted.
Ahead, scouting when they reached the emergency stairwell, Emily nearly cried with relief until the door refused to open. Locked? Of course it was then. Bear ran forward growling at the elevator doors they were already opening. 2 men in black uniforms stepped out, tasers drawn. Emily stepped in front of the woman, shielding her. "Don't move!" one of the men barked. Bear lunged. He didn't attack. He grabbed one of their arms hard and yanked, throwing the man off balance. The other tried to raise his taser, but Bear turned on him. Growling eyes locked. The distraction was enough. Emily yanked the fire alarm. Sprinklers went off across the entire facility. Screams, chaos, the elevator. Jammed lights flickered. They had seconds. She dragged the woman back through the hallway, then suddenly a miracle. Gerald, he was at the end of the hall, waving frantically toward a side exit Emily hadn't noticed before. This way, he yelled. They burst through the side door and into the cold night. Gerald slammed it behind them. Bear stayed back a second longer, growling, guarding, then bolted after them. They didn't stop running until they reached Emily's car. 2 blocks away, she drove without speaking. For 15 minutes, heart still hammering in her chest, the woman sat in the back seat, silent, eyes closed, leaning on Bear. Gerald sat in the front, calm as ever. "You knew," Emily said finally, her voice this whole time. "I knew they'd come for her." "Eventually," he said. "She wasn't supposed to survive. What is?" Gerald turned his head, slowly looking at Emily with the kind of gaze only someone who's seen too much can give. "She's proof," he said, "that they were doing more than taking care of old people. She's the last one." Last at what? He didn't answer that morning. Emily called Caleb again. "I have someone who needs protection." She said, "Emily, or what the hell did you do? I saved a life." He came through, arranged a meeting with a private investigator tied to a whistleblower protection firm. The woman, Subject 13, was taken into a safe location. No one knew her real name yet. She barely spoke, but she was safe. Gerald disappeared not long after Bear. He never left Emily's side again, and every once in a while late at night, Emily would wake up to find him standing by the window, staring out into the dark, like he still smelled something out there, something unfinished. It had been 8 days since Emily pulled Subject 13. Now simply called Anna, out of room 317. 8 days of hiding, 8 days of waiting for something, anything to happen. But no news came, no police, no investigation, no reporters at the gate, nothing. The facility remained open business as usual, like none of it had happened. Emily sat in her tiny living room scrolling through news feeds on her phone, while Bear lay curled at her feet, one eye, half-open ears twitching at every distant sound. Anna was asleep in the spare bedroom. She hadn't said more than a few full sentences since they'd brought her here. She ate in silence, slept in short bursts, flinched at loud noises, but the strange part, she never once cried, not even when the nightmares hit. Emily finally broke the silence by calling Caleb again. "I don't understand," she said, pacing the hallway just outside the bedroom. "We rescued someone who wasn't even supposed to exist. Shouldn't the state be crawling all over that place by now? You're assuming anyone wants to look into it." Caleb replied, "Places like Rose Hill are built with insulation, legal, financial, political. You pull one thread and the whole thing could unravel. No one wants that, so we just pretend nothing happened. You did the right thing, Em, but if you're looking for justice, real justice, you might have to go digging." There was a pause on the line. "Look, I know a guy used to be with federal oversight. Now he's freelance. He's not cheap, but he's quiet, discreet, and thorough." Emily sighed. "Give me his name." She met the investigator. 2 nights later, he was a wiry man in his late 50s with a voice that sounded like gravel. And Bourbon wore a battered bomber jacket and a wedding ring that looked like it hadn't been taken off since the Reagan era. "Name's Maddox," he said, sliding into the booth at the back of a diner just off the I-5. "You, Emily?" She nodded, sliding the notebook across the table. Maddox didn't open it immediately. He just stared at the cover like it might bite him. "Where'd you get this room?" 316 at Rose Hill. That made him look up. His eyes narrowed. "You sure about that?" "I was there." He flipped it open page by page, line by line occasionally, grunting, sometimes muttering a curse under his breath. When he finally closed it, he leaned back. "But this isn't elder care fraud. This is black bag stuff, experimental programs buried under medical budgets. If even half of this is legit, someone went to a lot of trouble to disappear it. And now it's coming back," Emily said. Quietly, Maddox tapped his fingers on the table. "There's a name in here, Dr. Ellis Quaid, that ring any bells?" Emily shook her head. "Used to work under the Department of Defense Biobehavioral Division, vanished from the public record in 2012. My guess he went private, took his research with him." Emily's stomach turned. What kind of research? Maddox gave her a look the kind people give before saying something awful, the kind that reprograms trauma memory, deletion, emotional reconditioning, human test groups, most of them forgotten by their families. Easy targets. Emily leaned in. "What do we do?" "We follow the money." The first break came 2 days later. Maddox called her at 4:17 in the morning. "Get dressed, meet me at the Records Archive, bring Bear." She did as told. They met in the parking lot of a state-run facility that looked like a DMV, married a warehouse inside. Maddox flashed a badge she was pretty sure was fake, but good enough to get them in. They combed through boxes of old files, the kind that hadn't been digitized. Yet, most were mundane meal plans, budget approvals, staff shift logs from a decade ago. But then Maddox found it: a transfer order, February 13th, 2011, 5 patients relocated from Facility 8B, now Rose Hill West Wing, to unknown holding unit clearance level. Read the names, were blacked out, all except one. "Anna L. She's been there that long," Emily whispered. Maddox nodded long enough for everyone to forget. She was even alive. He kept flipping until he stopped on a photocopied ID badge. Ellis Quaid Consultant, Rose Hill, Special Projects. There was an address scribbled on the back. "And pencil looks like we're going for a drive," Maddox muttered. They found Quaid's name tied to a shell company registered out of Delaware, funneling consulting fees to an office in Santa Rosa. When they got there, the building was gutted, stripped walls, torn carpet, empty file cabinets. Whoever had been there had cleared out fast, but Bear didn't seem convinced. He kept circling the far end of the room, sniffing along the edge of the baseboards. Then he barked. Emily rushed over and found a narrow vent cover, slightly ajar inside. Stuffed between old insulation and a dead mouse was a sealed manila folder. Inside the folder were photographs of Anna hooked to machines, monitored, watched page after page of biometric charts, brain scans, and chemical trial logs. One memo caught Emily's eye. Subject 13 has shown rare memory resistance. Recommend indefinite confinement to prevent breach. She stared at the sentence, her hands trembling. She was the only one who remembered. Maddox nodded grimly. That's why they buried her that night back at home. Emily showed Anna the photos. The woman didn't speak for a long time. She just looked at the pages in silence, flipping them slowly. Then finally, she said, "My name's not Anna." Emily blinked. "It's not. My name is June." She smiled barely. I remember now, in the days that followed, June began to change. She ate more, slept longer, spoke in full conversations. Bits and pieces of her past came back. Parents, school, a brother named Tyler who used to read comic books out loud at bedtime. She remembered being taken, remembered the needles, the isolation, but more than anything she remembered a voice. "You're not real. June, you're what we made." She woke up, screaming the first time she said that out loud. Bear was always there, jumping onto the bed, pressing his body against her like a weighted shield. And it worked. She always calmed down. Maddox disappeared not long after delivering the last of the files to a contact he trusted in the press. The files never made it to print. Instead, Rose Hill quietly changed ownership. The website went offline, and room 316, it was sealed for real. This time, Emily stayed in touch with June, who moved to a protected residence out of state under a new identity. Bear stayed with Emily, older now, moving slower, but still watchful. One night, as they sat on the porch, Emily looked down at him and said, "You knew before anyone you saw what none of us wanted to." He gave a soft whine, tail thumping, once she smiled. "Heroes come in all shapes, don't they?" Bear was slowing down. He still followed Emily from room to room like the loyal shadow he'd always been, but his pace was more deliberate now. Sometimes when he lay down, he gave a soft grunt, like it took more effort than it used to. Emily noticed it. Most in the mornings he used to greet the day by racing to the door the moment he heard birds chirping. Now he lingered on his dog bed a little longer, lifting his head first, then his body. He had earned the rest, but something in his eyes told Emily he wasn't done yet, not while the silence lingered, not while Rose Hill, stood June, now living under federal protection, had begun writing everything down. She filled notebook after notebook with fragmented memories, names, faces, descriptions of long white hallways, a woman with a green clipboard, a smell like bleach and copper. One name came up more than any other, Ellis Quaid. Emily circled it every time it appeared. The government claimed Quaid had been missing for years, dead. Some said retired abroad, said others, but
sighed. He was the architect that night. Emily sat on her porch, Bear curled up beside her, watching the sky darken from orange to blue to black. She held June's latest notebook in her lap, flipping through pages filled with scribbled nightmares and broken memories. One passage stopped her cold. I was in the chair again. The humming sound in the wall. I remember Quaid saying, "If it works on her, it works on anyone." And then the lights went out for a long time. Emily closed the notebook. What if June wasn't the only one? What if Rose Hill still had more secrets? The next day, Emily returned to the retirement home. Not officially, she parked 3 blocks away, dressed in a delivery uniform she borrowed from a friend, a cap low over her face, clipboard in hand, a box labelled medical supplies in the trunk. Bear waited in the passenger seat, watching the building like a sentry. She timed it perfectly. Mid-lunch. When the front desk was least staffed, she walked and like she belonged. No one stopped her. She made it halfway down the east wing before she slipped into the old supply corridor that used to run behind rooms. 310 to 320. She knew where to go. Room 319. Never mentioned in files, never lit from the outside, but always quiet. She pressed her ear to the wall and froze. There it was. The humming, faint, low, constant, like a machine behind drywall. She pulled out her phone and recorded it. Just 30 seconds. Enough proof that something was still active. Then she slipped out back home. Bear sniffed her hands before she even said a word. "You were right," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "There's something still going on." She sent the recording to Maddox. He responded. 5 minutes later with a single line. "That's not just electricity. That's frequency, modulation, minefield tech," Emily typed back. "What the hell is minefield?" Maddox called. "It's neural interference. The military tried it on PTSD patients in the early 2000s. Quaid developed a prototype supposed to suppress traumatic memories. Didn't work. Too many side effects. Rage, dissociation, hallucinations." "They're still running it?" Emily asked. "They are, if they're desperate enough to keep the past buried." Emily knew she couldn't do this alone anymore. She went to see Caleb. He met her at a diner halfway between their homes, nervously stirring his coffee before she even sat down. "You're going to get yourself killed," he said, without greeting. "I'm not walking away," Emily said. "You saw the files. You know what they did?" "Yeah, and I also know how many people buried this thing," layers Emily. "Bureaucratic cement you dig too far, and it's your name they erase next. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for help." Caleb sighed, rubbed his face, then leaned forward. "There's a hearing coming up," he whispered. "Unrelated case. But one of the contractors tied to Quaid is being called to testify. If we get a subpoena on record, even just mentioning Rose Hill, it forces a paper trail." Emily's heart raced. How long? 10 days. 10 days felt like an eternity. Emily kept a low profile, but every night Bear stood at the window watching, waiting. Then on day 6 it happened. Emily came home from the grocery store to find her front door cracked open. Bear growled before they even crossed the porch inside. The place had been ransacked. Not like a robbery. No broken glass. No missing TV. But the notebooks gone. June's notebooks. All of them. Except for one. The oldest one. The one from room 316. It was left on the kitchen counter. Open to a single-page photograph was paperclip to it, a black and white security cam still of Emily and Bear walking out of room 317. On the back of the photo, written in red ink, "You're being watched. Walk away." Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor beside Bear's bed, one hand on his fur, the other gripping the page. "This is how they scare people," she whispered. "Make it quiet, personal, make you doubt what's worth saving." Bear nuzzled her hand, and she knew she wasn't backing down. 2 days later, Caleb called again. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Someone leaked the Rose Hill files to the Oversight Committee Public Health Division." Emily's stomach dropped. "What?" "They're opening an inquiry. Quiet for now, but it's real. We've got traction." Her hands trembled. "Finally they'll want a witness," he added. "Someone who saw it firsthand, someone the public can connect to." Emily looked down at Bear. "He never left my side," she said softly. "Then bring him too, the night before the hearing." Emily went out onto the porch again. The stars were out. Air crisp. Bear curled beside her, in his usual spot. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the old ID badge she'd found weeks ago. Ellis Quaid. She hadn't said his name out loud in days, but tonight she did. I don't know where.
"You are," she said, staring into the dark. "But I know you're still out there watching, hiding, waiting." She paused. "And I'm not scared of you." Bear let out a soft bark, like an agreement. She smiled. "Tomorrow, we speak." The hearing was held in a modest government building just off the state capitol. No flashing lights, no swarm of reporters, just a slow trickle of officials, aides, and a few members of the public seated in rows of wooden chairs under buzzing fluorescent lights. Emily sat at the front, one hand resting on Bear's back. He was calm, composed, wearing a soft grey vest with the words "Therapy." Dog, retired, K9 stitched on the side. He wasn't here for show. He was here as a witness too, in the only way he could be. The room smelled like stale coffee and cheap paper. But to Emily, it smelled like war. They called her name just before noon. She stood, walked to the microphone and sat straight back. heart pounding. She had practiced this. She had read her statement a dozen times. But when she looked at the panel, 5 people in suits, one with tired eyes behind thick glasses. She didn't read from the page. She spoke from memory. My name is Emily Hayes. I'm a registered nurse. I've worked at multiple care facilities across this state. But what I'm here to talk about, what happened at Rose Hill, was never about care. It was about control, and the people they hurt were the ones no one thought to ask about. She paused behind her bear, let out a soft exhale like a grounding presence. Emily continued, I'm talking about a patient known as Subject 13, a woman named June. She was held without registration, without consent, and used in illegal experiments involving neurosuppression, all under the supervision of a man named Ellis Quaid, whose name and funding trail connect directly to private contractors with military ties. Murmurs spread across the chamber. One of the board members looked up sharply. Emily didn't stop. I found her. I got her out, and I'm here today because if I didn't speak, no one else would. But I'm not the hero in this story. She turned gently, placing her hand on Bear's shoulder.
He is? Bear raised his head slightly, eyes scanning the room. He's the reason I knew something was wrong. He's the one who refused to walk past that locked door. He's the one who saw what we didn't want to. He never gave up, even when we did. He reminded me that truth doesn't bark softly. Sometimes it howls after her statement. The questions came. Where's June? Now. What evidence do you have of Quaid's direct involvement? Why didn't you go to the police earlier? Some questions were fair. Some were barbed. Some clearly meant to cast doubt. But Emily answered everyone. She referenced Maddox's files, June's medical scans, the facility's medication records, the biometric scanner hidden behind room 3 Vanskeen. She showed them the photo of her and Bear leaving room 317, the one left behind by whoever ransacked her home. I was told to walk away, she said instead. I walked in. The final witness that day was unexpected. A man in a grey suit entered the room flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. Emily's heart stopped. Ellis Quaid, older now, hair, white skin, thin and drawn, but his eyes still sharp, still cold. The board chair leaned into the microphone. Dr. Quaid, you've been subpoenaed to appear under federal review. You may decline to answer, but we are authorized to continue proceedings in your absence. Quaid didn't speak right away. Then he looked directly at Emily. You have no idea
What we were doing, he said, his voice steady. You think we were monsters. You don't understand the world we were trying to protect. Emily stared back. You weren't protecting the world. You were hiding from it. Quaid shook his head, almost pitying June was unstable. You have no idea what she was capable of. Emily stood. I know what you were capable of, and I won't let you hide it anymore. The room was quiet when the hearing adjourned. Emily stepped out into the late afternoon sun, Bear beside her. The air felt different, lighter. Maddox met her outside. He didn't say much, just handed her a manila envelope. Whistleblower. Protections are in place, he said. The press will pick it up by morning, June. Safe. You did good. Emily nodded. She deserves her life back. You all do that night. Emily drove back home with Bear in the passenger seat, his head resting against the window, eyes half closed. The radio played soft folk music. The sun dipped below the trees for the first time in months. She didn't feel like she was being followed. She made dinner, nothing fancy, grilled cheese tomato soup. Bear sat on his usual mat near the table halfway through eating. She looked at him and smiled. Think we'll... Ever get used to normal again? He wagged his tail once. 2 weeks later, the headlines broke. Illegal. Human experiments tied to Rose Hill facility. Retired nurse and K9 expose hidden medical program. Where is Ellis? Quaid. No one had seen him since the hearing, but the damage was done. The investigations widened. Other facilities were named. Other victims began to surface. Some still alive, most still forgotten. June became the face of a quiet movement. Anonymous interviews blurred features, but her voice stronger, now reached people. Emily declined. Most interviews. She didn't want fame. She wanted closure. One evening, June called. I remembered something else, she said. Emily leaned against the kitchen counter, holding the phone with one hand, Bear's bowl in the other. What is it? There was a phrase they used before every session. Quaid would whisper it before the lights went on. Emily waited. He'd say, "You'll forget who you are before the world remembers what we did." Emily closed her eyes. "Not anymore," she said. "The world remembers now." 3 months passed. Emily went back to nursing at a small community clinic. Nothing secret, nothing hidden, just people who needed care, and someone to care enough to see them bare came to work with her twice a week. The patients adored him on his off days. He slept more, walked less, but he still barked when something didn't feel right. She trusted him more than any protocol. One evening, after locking up the clinic, Emily sat with Bear on the back steps. The sky above was orange and fading, the kind of summer twilight that made everything feel possible again. She scratched behind his ears. "You saved lives, Bear, more than you'll ever know." He leaned into her hand, a soft huff of contentment. "Funny," she whispered, "how the world thought you were retired, but you never really stopped working, did you?" She looked up at the stars. Some heroes wear uniforms, others wear fur. Thank you so much for following this story through every twist, secret, and howl in the night. It's been an emotional journey, and a reminder that truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just barks and waits for someone to listen. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if Bear barked at a locked door and no one else believed him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe in stories that celebrate animal heroes' justice and the people who refuse to look away, please share this one with someone who needs it from all of us. At Heroes for Animals, thank you.